Princess Lyra paced the length of her private chamber, her iridescent skin shimmering with agitation. The walls of polished crystal that had once felt like a sanctuary now seemed more like a prison. Outside her window, the 3 moons of Australis cast their glow across the capital city's silver spires. "Your Highness," spoke Mira, her trusted advisor, "the council has requested your presence again. They are insistent." Lyra sighed, her breath creating small ripples in the air around her. "Let them wait. I've heard their demands 100 times already." For the past 3 cycles, the Australian Empire had buzzed with speculation about the princess's refusal to choose a mate. It wasn't just a personal matter. It was a galactic one. The Australian royal bloodline carried genetic markers that stabilized their species' unique abilities to manipulate energy fields. Without Lyra's choice, diplomatic relations with neighboring star systems grew strained as rejected suitors returned home insulted. The most recent rejection, Prince Krell of the Taurian Dominion, had been particularly problematic. The Taurians controlled key hyperspace lanes that the Australians relied upon for trade. "The Emperor summons you," announced a royal guard from the doorway. The formal language meant her father was not calling as family but as ruler. Lyra's skin darkened slightly, a sign of her discomfort. She dismissed Mira with a small gesture and followed the guard through the winding corridors of the palace. Emperor Talmar sat alone in the small council chamber, his form tall and imposing even when seated. Unlike the grand throne room used for public meetings, this space allowed for private conversations. "Daughter," he said, his tone softer than she expected, "you understand why I've called you." "To lecture me again about my duty," Lyra replied, keeping her chin high. The Emperor's bioluminescent patterns shifted to express concern. "The Taurian ambassador has formally withdrawn from our trade negotiations. 3 other systems have recalled their dignitaries." "Let them," Lyra said. "I will not be rushed into a bond that lasts 10,000 years." "It is not about rushing," Talmar countered. "You have examined 342 potential mates from 17 species across 24 star systems. Your rejection of all is being viewed as deliberate provocation." Lyra turned toward the star map glowing in the center of the room. "None of them are compatible with my genetic sequence. You know this." "The royal scientists have confirmed acceptable compatibility with at least 15 candidates," her father replied. "Acceptable is not sufficient," Lyra said firmly. "The ancient texts speak of optimal resonance, not mere compatibility. I feel nothing when I'm near any of these suitors." Emperor Talmar rose from his seat, towering over his daughter. "The ancient texts also speak of duty. Our people look to you as the future. Without a stable bond, your abilities will remain unfocused and the succession uncertain." He approached the star map and gestured. It zoomed out, revealing the vastness of the galaxy. "I have been patient, Lyra, but I can be patient no longer. You have 1 solar cycle, 1 orbit of our world around our sun, to choose a mate. If you have not decided by then, the council will select one for you based on diplomatic advantage." Lyra's skin paled to almost white. "You wouldn't dare." "I would," he said sadly. "For the sake of our people, I must." After leaving her father, Lyra made a decision. That night, she summoned her most trusted scout captain to her private observatory. "Captain Jax," she said quietly, "I need you to take your fastest ship beyond the mapped territories. There must be species we haven't encountered yet, beings whose genetic patterns might be what I seek." The captain bowed. "It will be dangerous, Your Highness. The unexplored regions are our only hope." Lyra finished. "Go quietly and tell no one of your mission." As the captain departed, Lyra turned her gaze to the stars. Somewhere out there was the answer. She just needed to find it before time ran out. Captain Jack Reed squinted at the radar screen in the cramped control room of Outpost Horizon. 3 cups of stale coffee had done little to sharpen his focus during the long night shift. "Sir, we're picking up something strange," said Lieutenant Torres, her finger tapping at an unusual blip on the monitor. Doesn't match any known signature in our database. Jack leaned forward, suddenly alert. After 15 years with Earth Defense Force, he'd developed an instinct for trouble. How far out? About 30,000 kilometers in closing. Too controlled to be debris. Wake up the rest of the team, Jack ordered, reaching for the station-wide comm. All personnel to alert status. Unidentified vessel approaching. Within minutes, the skeleton crew of the frontier outpost was at their stations. Horizon wasn't much. Just a converted asteroid serving as humanity's furthest military presence in this sector of space. Earth had only recently developed the technology to reach this far, eager to establish a foothold among the stars. Visual contact in 5 seconds, announced the sensor operator. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a sleek silver craft unlike anything in the Earth fleet. It gleamed strangely, as if its hull was made of liquid metal rather than solid materials. That's definitely not one of ours, Jack muttered. Open broadcast channels, all frequencies. He straightened his uniform and faced the camera. This is Captain Jack Reed of Earth Defense Force Outpost Horizon. Unidentified vessel, please identify yourself and state your purpose. Several tense moments passed before the screen split, showing a humanoid figure with skin that seemed to shimmer like mother of pearl. The alien had no hair, large almond-shaped eyes, and delicate features that might almost be called beautiful in a strange, otherworldly way. Greetings, Earth vessel. I am Scout Captain Jax of the Australian Empire. We come in peace on an exploratory mission. Jack exchanged glances with his officers. None of them had heard of the Australian Empire before. Welcome to Earth space, Captain Jax. May I ask what brings you to this particular region? We weren't aware of any advanced civilizations nearby. The alien captain smiled. At least Jack thought it was a smile. We are mapping systems beyond our known territories. Your sector appeared recently in our long-range scans. We did not expect to find an established outpost. Before Jack could respond, the alien ship suddenly lurched on screen. Alarm signals blared from their consoles. Captain, Jax said urgently, our sensors detect a cosmic storm approaching, a phenomenon our ships are vulnerable to. We did not anticipate. The transmission cut out as the alien vessel shuddered violently. Streams of energy coursed across its hull. They're in trouble, Jack said, already moving toward the door. Prep the rescue shuttle. Torres, you're with me. Sir, his second-in-command protested. Protocol says we should wait for headquarters tow. Those people will be dead by then, Jack cut in. I'm not letting first contact end with us watching them die. 20 minutes later, Jack guided the shuttle alongside the damaged alien craft. Up close, it was even more impressive, and clearly in distress. Parts of its hull had turned from silver to dull gray, and systems were visibly failing. Using makeshift docking procedures, they managed to create a seal between the vessels. When the airlock opened, 3 Australians stood waiting, their skin pulsing with what Jack guessed was anxiety. Thank you for your assistance, Captain Jack said. Our ship's main drive was damaged in the storm. We can help with repairs, Jack offered. Our technology might be different, but the principles should be similar. Over the next several hours, the humans and Australians worked together to restore the alien ship's systems. Jack surprised the visitors with his intuitive understanding of their technology, suggesting unconventional solutions that their rigid training hadn't considered. What Jack didn't notice was one of the Australians discreetly scanning him, looking particularly interested when the device showed readings of his genetic makeup. As they prepared to depart, Captain Jax clasped Jack's hand in what seemed like a practiced human gesture. Your assistance will not be forgotten, Captain Reed. Perhaps our peoples will meet again soon. The Australian ship slipped away silently, leaving Jack staring after it from the viewport. Something told him this wouldn't be the last he'd see of these strange visitors. Back on their ship, an Australian officer turned to Captain Jax. The readings are conclusive. The humans, especially this Captain Reed, show the genetic markers Princess Lyra seeks. Jax nodded. Set course for Astralis immediately. The princess will want this information without delay. Jack stared at the official document in his hands, reading it for the third time to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. This has to be some kind of joke, he muttered, running a hand through his short brown hair. The paper, actual paper, not a digital file, was cream-colored with strange symbols embossed in silver around the edges. The message itself was in perfect English. Asterisk Captain Jack Reed of Earth Defense Force is formally invited to the Royal Court of Astralis as an honored representative of humanity. Transport will arrive in 7 Earth days. Prepare for a stay of no less than 1 lunar cycle. Asterisk. It had been only 2 weeks since the encounter with the Australian scout ship. Jack had filed his report, endured the debriefing, and expected that to be the end of it. Now this. The communicator on his desk buzzed. "Captain Reed, the general is requesting your presence immediately," came the voice of his assistant. When Jack entered the general's office 20 minutes later, he found not only his superior but also 3 officials in dark suits he didn't recognize. "Reed," the general said, "these gentlemen are from Earth Diplomatic Corps. It seems you've caught the attention of some very important aliens." One of the suits stepped forward. "Captain Reed, we've confirmed the authenticity of the invitation you received. This represents an unprecedented opportunity for humanity." "I'm just a frontier outpost commander," Jack protested. "Surely there are diplomats better suited." "They asked for you specifically," another official cut in. "The Australians have technology centuries beyond ours. FTL travel. Energy manipulation capabilities we can barely understand. We need this alliance." The message was clear. This wasn't really a request. 6 days later, Jack watched from the observation deck as the Australian transport descended toward Earth's main spaceport. The ship was at least 3 times larger than the scout vessel he'd encountered, its hull shimmering with the same liquid metal appearance. "Remember your briefing," said the diplomat assigned to accompany him to the landing. "The Australian Empire spans 27 star systems. They could be either our greatest allies or our greatest threat," Jack finished. "I get it. The journey to Astralis took just 4 days, though it should have been impossible to cross such vast distances so quickly." Jack spent most of the time trying not to show how impressed he was by the ship's interior. Rooms that seemed to reshape themselves to the occupants' needs, gravity that adjusted automatically for comfort, and views of space that somehow looked more vivid and colorful than he'd ever seen before. The Australian crew treated him with formal politeness, but he caught them watching him when they thought he wasn't looking. When they finally arrived, Jack's first glimpse of the Australian capital left him speechless. The city seemed to be made of crystal and light, with towering spires connected by bridges that appeared too delicate to support their own weight. Everything glowed from within, pulsing gently like a living thing. "We have arrived at the Royal Palace," announced his guide, an Australian named Vex. "You will be presented at the welcoming reception this evening." Jack tugged uncomfortably at the formal Earth uniform he'd been given. "And what exactly am I supposed to do at this reception?" "Simply be present," Vex replied. "Many dignitaries are curious about humans." The reception hall was filled with beings of every description. Some looked nearly human, while others were so alien that Jack couldn't even guess where their faces might be. All of them turned to stare when he was announced. The human representative, Captain Jack Reed of Earth, called out a court official. Whispers filled the room. Jack caught fragments. Primitive species, barely achieved spaceflight, strange appearance. He held his head high and walked forward as he'd been instructed, trying not to feel like a zoo exhibit. A hush fell over the gathering. Jack looked up to see everyone bowing as a new figure entered the hall. Princess Lyra moved like flowing water, her skin shifting through pearlescent colors as she passed beneath different lights. Her royal attire seemed to float around her rather than hang from her body. She paused, scanning the crowd, until her gaze fell on Jack. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw something like recognition flash across her features. To the shock of everyone present, the princess changed direction and walked directly toward him. Captain Reed, she said, her voice musical and clear. I would speak with you privately. The collective gasp from the assembled dignitaries told Jack that whatever was happening was highly unusual and probably trouble. Jack followed Princess Lyra through a series of crystal archways that seemed to change color with each footstep. Two royal guards trailed at a respectful distance, their expressions unreadable. I apologize for the abruptness of my approach, Lyra said, her voice carrying a musical quality that human speech couldn't replicate. Such directness is not typical of our customs. I gathered that from the reaction of your court, Jack replied, trying to match her formal tone. May I ask why I've been brought here? They entered a circular room with walls that appeared transparent, offering breathtaking views of the Australian capital. As Jack watched, the transparency faded in sections, creating privacy while maintaining the view. Please be seated. Lyra gestured to what appeared to be a hovering cushion of light. When Jack hesitated, she added, it will support your weight. Our furnishings adapt to their users. Cautiously, Jack sat down. The light cushion felt surprisingly solid and molded itself to his body perfectly. Your species intrigues me, Captain Reed, Lyra said, taking the seat across from him. You achieve spaceflight despite your biological limitations. You lack natural energy manipulation abilities, yet you've compensated with remarkable technological innovation. Jack shifted uncomfortably. We manage. But I don't think you invited me across the galaxy to discuss human ingenuity. A smile played at the corners of Lyra's mouth. Direct indeed. This is refreshing. Her expression grew more serious. I face a dilemma that concerns the future of my people. You may have noticed I am of royal lineage. It was mentioned once or twice, Jack said dryly. As heir to the Australian Empire, I am required to select a mate. This choice carries significant diplomatic weight. Jack's eyebrows shot up. And this concerns Earth how exactly? My biology is complex, Captain. Australians require genetic compatibility for successful bonding, beyond mere physical reproduction. Our scientists discovered something unexpected when analyzing the data from our encounter with your outpost. Human genetic structures contain markers remarkably similar to ancient Australian patterns. Jack's military training helped him keep his expression neutral, but his mind raced with implications. So we're distant cousins. That's why I'm here. It's more complicated, Lyra said. But essentially, yes. You represent a species with potential compatibility that is not already entangled in our complex political alliances. Before Jack could respond, a chime sounded, and a tall Australian entered. Jack recognized him as Lord Zenith, one of the royal advisors who had been at the reception. Your Highness, he said, bowing deeply. The Vexeri delegation requests an audience. They are displeased about the humans' presence. Lyra's skin darkened slightly. Tell them I will meet with them tomorrow. Lord Zenith's discomfort was visible. Prince Dorn insisted it cannot wait. He claims the humans' presence violates the traditional courtship protocols. Traditional protocols were designed for traditional circumstances, Lyra replied coolly. Remind Prince Dorn that my final choice remains mine alone. After the advisor departed, Jack leaned forward. I'm causing trouble for you. Trouble existed long before you arrived, Captain. But now I must ask you to learn our ways quickly. There are those who would use your unfamiliarity with our customs against both of us. Over the next several days, Jack struggled to navigate the bewildering complexity of Australian court life. Simple actions like how to accept a drink or which hand to offer in greeting carried political significance he couldn't begin to comprehend. No, sighed Mira, the princess's advisor who had been assigned to tutor him. The third finger must remain extended when greeting a member of the scientific caste. To curl it implies you question their findings. Jack groaned. How does anyone remember all this? We are born to it, Mira said simply. One evening, Jack found Princess Lyra waiting in his quarters. She dismissed her guards with a gesture. Walk with me in the night gardens, she said. We can speak more freely there. As they strolled among plants that glowed and shifted like living constellations, Jack finally asked the question that had been bothering him. Why me specifically? There are billions of humans. Lyra stopped beside a fountain that flowed upward instead of down. Because you solved problems on our scout ship in ways no Australian would have considered. Your adaptability, your unique perspective. These qualities may be precisely what our empire needs. Jack studied her face, trying to read her alien expressions. And what do you need, princess? For the first time since he'd met her, Lyra seemed at a loss for words. The grand hall fell silent as Prince Dorn of the Vexari Dominion strode through the massive doors. His scaled skin glistened under the crystal lights, patches of it glowing with contained energy. Behind him followed 6 Vexari guards, each bearing ceremonial weapons that pulsed with power. Jack stood at Princess Lyra's side, feeling distinctly out of place in the formal attire the Australians had provided him. Though cut to appear like his military uniform, the material responded to his body temperature and movements in ways Earth fabric never could. Princess Lyra, Prince Dorn's voice boomed across the hall. Your continued association with this primitive species insults the dignity of all proper suitors. Lyra's skin rippled with subtle color changes that Jack had learned indicated controlled anger. The human is here at my invitation, Prince Dorn. Your opinion on the matter is noted but irrelevant. Dorn's eyes narrowed, the vertical pupils contracting to thin lines. Not irrelevant under the ancient code of succession. He raised a clawed hand, pointing directly at Jack. I invoke the right of challenge. If this human truly deserves consideration as your potential mate, let him prove his worth in combat. Gasps echoed through the hall. Even Jack, with his limited understanding of Australian customs, knew this was a dramatic escalation. The right of challenge has not been invoked in 7 generations, said Emperor Talmar, rising from his throne. Are you certain this is the path you choose, Prince Dorn? I am, Dorn replied, his scales brightening with confidence. Unless the human fears to face me. All eyes turned to Jack. He looked to Lyra, whose expression revealed nothing to untrained human eyes, but he had learned enough to recognize her concern. I accept, Jack said, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. He had no idea what such a challenge entailed, but refusing would dishonor not only himself, but Earth as well. Then it is settled, Emperor Talmar declared. The challenge will commence at first light tomorrow in the Arena of Ancestors. Later, in a private chamber, Lyra paced frantically while Jack sat watching her. This is precisely what I feared, she said. Dorn has mastered energy combat since childhood. He can channel the natural Vexari power through his entire body. And I'm guessing that's bad for me, Jack said dryly. Lyra stopped pacing. He could kill you with a touch. Then why is this challenge allowed? Seems like an easy way to eliminate unwanted competition. Because traditionally, all potential royal mates would have similar abilities, Lyra explained. The challenge tests not just strength but control and wisdom in using one's power. She touched his shoulder. But you have no such abilities to counter his. Jack stood up, squaring his shoulders. Then teach me what you can before morning. Through the night, Lyra showed Jack the basics of Australian combat forms. Though he couldn't manipulate energy like the aliens, the movements and strategies could still serve him. Your advantage is that Dorn will underestimate you, Lyra said as dawn approached. He believes humans are weak and slow. Jack smiled grimly. Not the first time someone's made that mistake. The Arena of Ancestors was a perfect circle carved from what appeared to be a single massive crystal. Thousands of Australians filled the surrounding seats, with representatives from a dozen alien species watching from special boxes. Jack recognized diplomatic envoys from several worlds, including a small human delegation that had arrived overnight. Prince Dorn stood at one end of the arena, his body now covered in ceremonial armor that left his energized scales visible. Jack wore only light protection, allowing maximum mobility. The challenge of worth follows ancient rules, announced a court official. Victory comes through yielding, incapacitation. Or, he paused, looking at Jack, death. May wisdom guide your actions. A crystal chime sounded, signaling the start of combat. Dorn immediately charged, his hands glowing with crackling energy. Jack dodged aside, remembering Lyra's warning not to let the Vexari touch him. Dorn's superior speed surprised Jack. A glancing blow to his shoulder sent painful energy coursing down his arm, nearly causing him to drop to his knees. First blood to the superior species, Dorn taunted. Yield now, human, and I may let you live. Jack circled carefully, shaking feeling back into his arm. Funny thing about humans, he replied. We don't give up easily. He feinted left, then rolled right as Dorn lunged. Using a move from Earth's martial arts combined with the Australian techniques Lyra had shown him, Jack swept the prince's legs out from under him. The crowd gasped as the mighty Vexari crashed to the ground. Jack pressed his momentary advantage, landing a solid kick before retreating from the energy discharge that followed. Dorn rose, his scales pulsing bright with rage. No more games, he snarled. The battle intensified, Jack relying on his training and adaptability while Dorn brought his full alien power to bear. For every energy blast Jack avoided, another grazed him, leaving burns and numbness. But Jack noticed something. Each powerful attack left Dorn briefly drained, his scales dimming momentarily before recharging. Getting tired, Jack taunted, drawing another furious attack that he narrowly escaped. This time, when Dorn's energy ebbed, Jack struck with everything he had. A combination of blows targeting vulnerable points Lyra had identified sent the prince staggering backward. Before Dorn could recover, Jack pressed a simple metal object against the prince's chest, his Earth Defense Force insignia pin, which conducted the prince's own energy back into his body in a feedback loop. Dorn collapsed, his systems overloaded by his own power. The arena fell silent, then erupted in astonished exclamations as the court official declared Jack the victor. In the royal box, Princess Lyra stood, her skin glowing with colors no one had seen before. Jack sat alone in his quarters, nursing his injuries from the challenge. The Australian medical team had treated his burns with technology far beyond Earth's capabilities, but a dull ache remained throughout his body. A soft chime announced a visitor. Enter, he called, expecting the medical attendant. Instead, Captain Jacks of the Australian scout ship stepped through the doorway. The captain's expression was solemn. Captain Reed, Jack said with a formal bow. Your victory has caused quite the stir in the Empire. No one expected a human to defeat a Vexari prince. Jack nodded cautiously. I had good training. Indeed, Princess Lyra is known for her thoroughness. Jax hesitated, which is why I felt you should know the full truth about your presence here. Something in the Australian's tone put Jack on alert. What truth? Jax placed a small crystal on the table between them. It activated automatically, projecting a series of images and data streams that Jack recognized as genetic maps. Our first encounter was not accidental, Jax explained. Princess Lyra sent our scout ship to find compatible species after rejecting all known candidates in the Empire. We were specifically searching for genetic markers matching these patterns. Jack stared at the rotating DNA strands. You were looking for humans. Not specifically. We had no knowledge of your species until we detected your outpost. But when we analyzed samples from your crew, we found something remarkable. Jax highlighted certain sections of the genetic map. These sequences, they're almost perfect matches for what Princess Lyra needs for a successful bond. And you took these samples without permission, Jack said, anger rising in his voice. Our scanners are passive and non-invasive, Jax replied defensively. But yes, we gathered data without your knowledge. Jack stood up, ignoring the pain from his injuries. So I was selected before I ever set foot on this planet. Before I ever met Lyra. All this talk about my adaptability and unique perspective, that was just convenient justification. The compatibility is genuine, Jax insisted. But the princess needed to secure your presence here before making her final determination. Jack turned away, looking out at the alien landscape beyond his window. I've been manipulated from the start. After Jax departed, Jack remained at the window, watching the strange double sunset of Astralis. His thoughts were interrupted by another chime at his door. I'm not in the mood for more visitors, he called out. Jack, please. It was Lyra's voice. He sighed and waved a hand over the door sensor. The princess entered alone, without her usual guards or attendants. Captain Jax informed me of your conversation, she said quietly. I came to explain. What's to explain? Jack asked bitterly. I'm just a genetic match, picked from a primitive species to serve your royal needs. Lyra's skin darkened with emotion. That's not the complete truth. But it is the truth, he countered. Yes, she admitted after a pause. Initially, when my scouts reported finding your species, I was desperate. My father's ultimatum left me little choice but to explore all possibilities. So I was just the best option among bad choices. At first, Lyra said, stepping closer, but watching you adapt to our world, seeing how you handled the court politics, observing your solution to defeating Prince Dorn, these things couldn't be predicted by genetic compatibility. Jack turned to face her fully. How can I trust anything between us now? Before Lyra could answer, a distant explosion shook the building. Warning signals began pulsing throughout the palace. What's happening? Jack demanded. Lyra's skin paled almost to white. The Imperial alarm. We're under attack. They rushed to the corridor where palace guards were already evacuating residents. One guard spotted the princess and hurried over. Your Highness, you must come with us immediately. Lord Vex has seized the Central Command Center with forces loyal to him. He claims the humans' victory was fraudulent, and that you have been compromised. A coup, Lyra whispered. Another explosion rocked the palace, closer this time. The ceiling above them cracked, sending crystalline shards raining down. Jack instinctively pulled Lyra away from the falling debris. We can't reach the secure bunkers, the guard said urgently. The main routes are already controlled by the rebels. Jack's military training took over. Is there another way out? Service corridors, maintenance tunnels. The old waterways, Lyra suggested. They run beneath the palace, from the time before we mastered atmospheric control. With the guard leading the way, they navigated through increasingly damaged sections of the palace. The sounds of energy weapons and shouted commands echoed around them. Why would Lord Vex do this? Jack asked, as they descended a hidden staircase. He and others believe allowing a human into the royal line would weaken the empire, Lyra explained. They would rather see my father's bloodline end than be contaminated by outside genetics. As they reached the ancient tunnels below the palace, Jack realized that despite everything he'd just learned, he was risking his life to protect Lyra. And somehow, that felt like the most natural thing in the world. For 3 days, Jack and Princess Lyra hid in the ancient caverns beneath the capital city. They moved only at night, gathering information from loyal citizens about the coup's progress. The loyal guard who had helped them escape had been captured, but not before securing them supplies. My father is still alive, Lyra told Jack as she returned from meeting with a secret contact. Vex has him under house arrest in the Northern Palace. The official story is that I've been kidnapped by you. Jack looked up from the makeshift map he'd been studying. Clever. Turns public opinion against both me and Earth. Lyra sat beside him, her luminescence dimmed to avoid detection. In the days they'd spent in hiding, something had changed between them. Crisis had stripped away pretense, leaving only truth. I've been thinking about what you said before the attack, Lyra said softly. About trust. Jack nodded. And you were right to feel betrayed. My initial interest was purely scientific, genetic compatibility that could satisfy the royal requirements. But now, she paused, her skin rippling with colors that Jack had learned to recognize as profound emotion. Now I understand why the ancient texts speak of more than mere compatibility. Meaning? Our time together, facing challenges, overcoming differences, has created something our scientists could never have predicted. The true resonance. Jack studied her face in the dim light. Despite her alien features, he could read sincerity there. I feel it too, he admitted. But it doesn't solve our larger problem. Even if we retake the palace, the issues that caused this coup will remain. Many of your people will never accept a human in the royal line. Lyra's expression brightened suddenly. Perhaps they don't have to. Dawn was breaking as they put their plan into action. Using underground passages known only to the royal family, they infiltrated the palace communication center. With Lyra's knowledge and Jack's tactical thinking, they overcame the minimal guard and secured the system. Ready? Jack asked, his hand poised over the broadcast control. Lyra nodded. All Imperial channels. Their faces appeared on viewing screens throughout the Empire as Lyra addressed her people. Citizens of Australis, I speak to you freely and without coercion. The claims of my kidnapping are false. Lord Vex and his conspirators have attempted to seize power through deception and violence. She continued, explaining the situation clearly while Jack monitored the palace security systems for any response to their broadcast. They're mobilizing, he warned. We have maybe 5 minutes. Lyra nodded and continued with greater urgency. Today I come before you not just as your princess, but as a representative of our future. The Australian Empire has thrived through adaptation and wisdom. Now we face a new challenge that requires both. Jack joined her in the frame. I am Captain Jack Reed of Earth. I came to your world as a representative of my species, but I have learned that our differences are not barriers. They are strengths. Lyra's skin glowed with determination. The ancient traditions call for a mate bond to preserve the royal line. But I propose something greater. An alliance between our peoples based not on traditional bonding but on mutual respect and shared purpose. Security forces could be heard approaching outside. Jack checked the door seals. Humans possess adaptability, creativity, and resilience that complement Australian wisdom and technology. Lyra continued, together, we can create something greater than either of our civilizations could achieve alone. The doors began to glow as energy weapons attacked the seals. We ask Emperor Talmar to convene the Imperial Council immediately, Jack added, not to approve a traditional mate bond, but to formalize a new kind of partnership, one that honors Australian tradition while embracing new possibilities. The doors burst open just as they finished. Guards rushed in, but to their surprise, these were royal guards loyal to the Emperor, not Vex's forces. The Emperor requests your presence, their leader announced. Lord Vex has been contained. Later, in the Grand Council chamber, Emperor Talmar sat with Jack and Lyra before him. The full council had assembled, along with representatives from Earth who had arrived after receiving emergency transmissions about the coup. Your broadcast reached every corner of the Empire, Talmar said, and beyond. The response has been unexpected. Meaning? Lyra asked. The people are intrigued by your vision of partnership rather than traditional bonding. Many see wisdom in an alliance that combines our strengths. Jack stepped forward. Not just our two peoples, but a model for cooperation throughout the galaxy. Different species working together instead of competing for dominance. Emperor Talmar's skin rippled with thoughtful colors. Lord Vex and his supporters saw humans as inferior. Their defeat suggests otherwise. We are different, Jack acknowledged. But difference isn't inferiority. It's opportunity. Lyra joined him. Father, I ask your blessing not for a traditional mate bond, but for a diplomatic union that opens a new chapter in our history. The Emperor rose, his massive form towering over them both. For a long moment, he was silent. Then, slowly, his skin began to glow with the royal colors of approval. So be it, he declared. Let it be recorded that on this day, the Australian Empire and Earth began a new journey together, not as ruler and subject, not as superior and inferior, but as partners in the great expanse of stars. As cheers filled the chamber, Jack turned to Lyra. In her alien eyes, he saw a future neither of them could have imagined when their journey began, a future they would build together.